Dolly Parton has finally admitted the truth about Porter Wagoner. For 50 years, the story of their partnership has been wrapped in glamour, loyalty, and music. But beneath the sparkling suits and stage lights, something far more painful was unfolding. And Dolly has never spoken about it like this before. When she first walked onto Porter's stage in the late 1960s, she was young, ambitious, and unknown. He was already a household name, a powerful figure on the Porter Wagoner show. Together they created a sound that defined an era. But behind closed doors, their bond grew tangled. A mix of control, gratitude, resentment, and something neither of them could fully name. What looked perfect on television was slowly fracturing in private. Now, at 79, Dolly has finally pulled back the curtain. What did she endure during those years by Porter's side? What truths has she carried in silence for half a century? And why is she choosing to reveal it now? It was 1967 when Dolly Parton's life changed forever. Fresh from the Smoky Mountains and eager to break into Nashville's competitive music scene, she was still searching for her place when Porter Wagoner spotted her. At the time, Porter was already a major figure in country music. His syndicated television program, The Porter Wagoner Show, reached millions of American homes each week. When his longtime co-star Norma Jean left the program, Porter needed someone new to fill the gap, someone who could sing, charm audiences, and bring a spark to the stage. Dolly was just 21, unknown to most viewers, but her talent was undeniable. Porter extended an invitation to join his show, giving her the kind of platform that aspiring singers could only dream of. Almost overnight, she went from playing small venues to standing in front of national audiences. But it wasn't easy. Norma Jean's fans were fiercely loyal, and they didn't take kindly to Dolly replacing their favorite. In those early months, she was often met with boos from live audiences and skeptical stares from longtime viewers. Porter, however, stood firmly by her side. He believed in her potential in a way few others did. He showcased her talents, giving her duets, solos, and more stage time. He helped shape her public image, presenting her as both a bright young talent and part of his musical family. Together they started performing songs that showcased their contrasting voices, his deep, steady tone against her clear, emotional soprano. Hits like The Last Thing on My Mind quickly turned their pairing into a phenomenon. They looked like a perfect match on stage, mentor and protégée, star and rising star. Yet even in these early days, some who worked behind the scenes sensed something complicated taking root. Dolly was fiercely ambitious, determined to carve her own path, while Porter was used to being the center of attention on his own stage. His personality was larger than life, sometimes controlling, always assertive. Her talent, meanwhile, was growing too quickly to remain in anyone's shadow for long. Though the public saw harmony, those close to them whispered that a quiet tension was building. Not hostility, but the friction between two strong forces moving toward very different destinies. Their partnership was still in its honeymoon phase, but the seeds of future conflict were already being planted. What began as an opportunity would soon become the most defining and difficult relationship of Dolly's early career. By the late 1960s, the partnership between Porter Wagoner and Dolly Parton was becoming a cultural force. Their duets were climbing the country charts, their chemistry was undeniable, and every week their faces lit up television screens across America. Porter's show, already a hit, reached new heights with Dolly at his side. She brought a fresh energy, a distinct voice, and a songwriting talent that audiences hadn't fully seen yet. Behind the scenes, record executives and promoters started noticing something Porter hadn't entirely expected. Dolly was quickly becoming the draw. Her popularity surged with a speed that surprised even seasoned Nashville insiders. Fan letters poured in. Her songs began to gain traction not only within their duet repertoire, but also as solo numbers. Viewers who had once booed her now tuned in specifically to see her. Her presence transformed the program, and soon her name appeared alongside Porter's on billboards, tour posters and album covers. The mentor-protégée narrative still held in public, but inside the business, people were starting to talk about her as a star in her own right. This shift created a subtle but growing imbalance. Porter had built his career as the central figure on his stage, the leader of his musical ensemble. Now, for the first time, someone standing beside him was drawing equal, sometimes greater, attention. Colleagues observed Porter becoming more protective over the show's format, the touring schedules, and even the song choices. He insisted on shaping their image together, ensuring that every performance still carried his stamp. Dolly, meanwhile, kept writing songs at a furious pace, pouring her ambitions into melodies that didn't always fit neatly within the confines of his program. Some in Nashville speculated that Porter's feelings went beyond professional pride. He had championed Dolly from the beginning, but now he was watching her star rise faster than his own. It wasn't just a matter of stage time or album credits, it was about control over a narrative he had once fully owned. For a man who had spent years as the centerpiece, this was unfamiliar territory. The dynamic between them, while still warm on stage, was beginning to shift beneath the surface. Dolly sensed it too. She had deep gratitude for what Porter had done, but she wasn't content to remain in the background of someone else's story. She was carving out a path toward independence, even if that meant challenging the structure that had lifted her up in the first place. What had started as a harmonious partnership was now evolving into something more complicated, a delicate balance of loyalty, rivalry, and unspoken tension. The world saw two singers thriving together. Inside their orbit, however, both were beginning to realize that they couldn't stand side by side forever. By the early 1970s, the tension between Dolly Parton and Porter Wagoner could no longer stay beneath the surface. Dolly had outgrown the role she was brought in to play. She wasn't just Porter's co-star anymore, she had become a major artist in her own right. Her songwriting was winning critical respect, her solo recordings were gathering momentum, and she felt an unmistakable pull toward independence. Staying on Porter's show, under his leadership, began to feel like standing still. Dolly made the decision that would define the rest of her career. She would leave the Porter Wagoner show to go solo. It wasn't a sudden choice, but one that built over time as her ambitions deepened and her confidence grew. For Porter, this was not just a professional shift, it was a personal blow. He had brought her into the spotlight, shared the stage with her, and shaped their public image together. Her departure wasn't simply a career move, it was a symbolic break from his orbit. The moment she told him, the reaction was intense. Porter reportedly argued fiercely, not only about contracts and obligations but about loyalty. He felt betrayed by the woman he had championed, the partner he believed would stay by his side. For Dolly, the conversation was equally emotional. She cared deeply for him, but she also understood that staying meant sacrificing her own identity. She needed a way to say goodbye that wasn't cruel, but honest. A way to express everything she couldn't say in a boardroom or dressing room. In 1973, she sat down and wrote, "I Will Always Love You." It wasn't a love song, in the romantic sense. It was a parting message, tender, respectful, and final. She later revealed that she played it for Porter privately, in his office. As she sang, he reportedly listened in silence. When the last line faded, he was moved to tears. In that moment, both of them understood that their partnership was coming to an end, but neither could fully untangle the emotional complexity behind it. The farewell was not clean. Porter tried to convince her to reconsider, warning that she was risking everything they had built. Dolly, however, stood firm. Her departure was announced, and with it one of country music's most successful duos began to dissolve. Fans saw it as a professional change. Those close to them saw something far deeper. A bond that had once been unbreakable was beginning to crack, not from hatred but from two powerful wills moving in opposite directions. What should have been a quiet goodbye would soon erupt into a public battle, one that neither of them could fully control. Dolly's departure from the Porter Wagoner show didn't end their story. It set off a chain reaction that would play out not on stage but in courtrooms and newspapers. In 1979, years after she had left, Porter filed a $3 million lawsuit against her. He claimed breach of contract, asserting that she owed him for managerial guidance, television exposure, and the career foundation he had helped build. For fans who had watched their partnership blossom on television, the lawsuit was shocking. For Dolly, it was a painful reminder that even deeply personal bonds could unravel in public. The legal action wasn't born overnight. In the years following her departure, Porter reportedly grew increasingly bitter about how quickly Dolly's career soared. She had become a household name worldwide, crossing into pop music, acting, and business. Meanwhile, his star had dimmed from its earlier peak. Behind the legal language there was a deeper emotional undercurrent, resentment, hurt, and a lingering sense of betrayal. The lawsuit brought those feelings into the open, forcing both of them to confront their fractured relationship on a national stage. The proceedings were contentious. Lawyers for both sides debated the terms of their agreements, royalties, and the extent of Porter's contributions to Dolly's rise. She could have fought him aggressively, but instead she chose a different path. Rather than prolong a bitter public spectacle, Dolly agreed to a settlement. She paid him a substantial sum, reported to be over $1 million, to resolve the matter quietly. It wasn't an admission of guilt, it was her way of closing a chapter that had become corrosive. The lawsuit marked a turning point in how the public perceived their partnership. Once seen as inseparable, they were now cast in opposing roles: mentor versus protégée, plaintiff versus defendant. Country music fans picked sides. Some argued Porter had every right to claim what he was owed. Others believed Dolly had more than repaid him through loyalty, visibility, and continued respect. In interviews during this period, Porter was outspoken, sometimes sharply critical. Dolly, in contrast, maintained a composed diplomatic front, refusing to speak ill of him publicly. Those close to her say the lawsuit cut deep, not just financially but emotionally. She had always viewed their connection as complicated but meaningful. Seeing it reduced to legal claims and headlines was a wound she rarely addressed openly. For Porter, the lawsuit became both a public stand and in some ways a final attempt to hold on to the significance he once had in her life. It was the moment when their private story fully entered the public arena. The mentor-protégé bond that had defined a musical era was now fractured for everyone to see. After the lawsuit faded from headlines, Dolly Parton and Porter Wagoner stepped into very different phases of their lives. By the early 1980s, Dolly's career had exploded beyond the boundaries of country music. She had crossover hits like 9 to 5, starred in Hollywood films, and became an international icon. Her image shifted from Porter's co-star to a self-made powerhouse. The legal conflict had been settled, but the emotional distance between them remained. They were no longer musical partners, and for years their lives rarely intersected in public. Porter's career, meanwhile, entered a more turbulent period. Without Dolly by his side, his television show eventually ended in 1981. His musical influence remained respected, but he struggled to replicate the widespread attention he had once enjoyed. Industry insiders noticed that he often spoke of the past, of the years with Dolly, with a mixture of pride and bitterness. In some interviews he praised her talent, in others he hinted at unresolved grievances. It was as if their shared history had become both his greatest achievement and his deepest wound. Dolly, for her part, kept her words about Porter measured and respectful. She didn't erase him from her story. She mentioned him often in interviews, crediting him for giving her a platform and acknowledging the role he played in her early success. But she never delved into the personal pain publicly. Instead, she expressed her feelings through actions that few fans saw at the time. Quietly, she bought Porter's publishing catalog when he faced financial troubles. The move ensured that he would receive ongoing income and retain control over his songs. She didn't publicize this gesture. It wasn't about repairing her image. It was about honoring the complicated bond they once shared. Friends close to both observed a subtle shift during this period. Porter's anger softened as the years went on. Dolly's public diplomacy remained steady, but privately she carried the weight of their shared past. She had built an empire, yet she never completely severed the connection to the man who had once stood beside her at the dawn of her career. This wasn't a reconciliation, not yet, but it showed that beneath the lawsuits and career moves, a thread of loyalty endured. Their legacies became intertwined in the eyes of the public. Fans looked back on their duets as golden moments from a different era, unaware of the quiet, complicated gestures happening behind the scenes. Porter became, in many ways, a figure frozen in Dolly's origin story, while she continued to shape the future of country music itself. Neither of them spoke openly about the emotional toll of those years, but both carried it, each in their own way. The bitterness that once dominated headlines was beginning to fade, replaced by something quieter, reflection, and perhaps the first glimmers of regret. As the 2000s approached, time began to soften what conflict had hardened. Dolly Parton and Porter Wagoner had spent decades apart, their lives running on parallel tracks that rarely crossed. Yet as Porter's health began to fail in his later years, something unexpected happened. Their story, once defined by ambition and legal battles, turned into one of reflection and reconciliation. Porter faced serious health challenges in his final years, including a diagnosis of lung cancer in 2007. By then he had returned to the Grand Ole Opry stage as a respected elder of country music. Though his national fame had dimmed from its peak, within Nashville he was still a revered figure. As his condition worsened, Dolly quietly re-entered his life. She visited him at the hospital, not as a business partner or former collaborator, but as someone who had shared a deeply personal chapter with him. Those close to them described the meetings as emotional, filled with unspoken understanding rather than public drama. That same year they reunited on stage at the Opry for what would become one of their final performances together. It wasn't a grand comeback or a publicity stunt. It was two people, once inseparable, sharing the spotlight one last time. Porter, frail but proud, introduced Dolly with warmth. She responded with genuine affection, their smiles carrying decades of history between them. The audience sensed they were witnessing something rare, a bridge being rebuilt in real time, after years of silence. Porter's final months were marked by tributes and visits from fellow artists who had grown up watching him and Dolly shape the genre. But it was Dolly's presence that resonated most deeply. When he passed away in October 2007, she stepped onto the stage at his funeral and sang "I Will Always Love You," the same song she had written as a farewell more than 3 decades earlier. This time it wasn't a goodbye to a professional partner. It was a final offering to someone whose presence had defined her early life. Her performance moved the room to silence. For those who remembered their split, it was a moment of clarity. The bitterness, the lawsuits, the decades of distance, all of it seemed to dissolve in that single song. Dolly didn't deliver a speech. She didn't explain their story. She let the music, the same language that had bound them from the beginning, carry the weight of everything left unsaid. In interviews following his death, Dolly spoke about Porter with a tenderness she had long kept private. She described their relationship as complex, acknowledging both the joy and the difficulty without hiding behind polite phrases. For the first time, she allowed glimpses of the truth to surface, that their connection had always been more layered than fans understood, and that saying goodbye to him for the second time carried a different kind of finality. Their reconciliation wasn't dramatic or publicized. It was quiet, personal, and deeply human. In the end, the woman who had once walked away returned, not to rewrite their history but to honor it. In recent years, as Dolly Parton has entered her late 70s, she's spoken more openly about the partnership that defined her early career. Time has given her a rare clarity, and in interviews and public appearances, She has allowed layers of emotion to surface that she once kept tightly guarded. She no longer speaks about Porter Wagoner in rehearsed soundbites or neatly packaged anecdotes. Instead, she talks about him as someone who was central to her story, complicated, flawed, gifted, and unforgettable. She has acknowledged that their bond was never simple. It wasn't just a business relationship, and it wasn't purely friendship. It was something in between, built on creative energy, personal attachment, and competing visions. When she says now that Porter meant a great deal to her, it carries the weight of decades of silence. She admits that leaving him was one of the hardest choices she ever made, not because she doubted her path, but because of what that choice cost emotionally. She also admits that for years she held back the full truth to protect not only herself but him, and the legacy they built together. These reflections have reframed their story for a new generation of fans. Many younger listeners know "I Will Always Love You" through Whitney Houston's soaring 90s version. But few realize the song was born out of a deeply personal goodbye between two country performers, navigating ambition, pride, and love. Dolly has made sure that the real context is not lost. She often shares that Porter's influence was both a gift and a challenge, the push she needed and the wall she eventually had to climb over. Porter's absence has also allowed Dolly to confront feelings she once buried beneath professional polish. She has spoken about regret, not for leaving but for the hurt that lingered between them for so long. She admits that if time had allowed, she might have expressed more of what she felt directly to him. Instead, she carried those emotions quietly, letting music do the talking. When she looks back now, she does so with a sense of peace. The bitterness has long faded. What remains is gratitude, and the knowledge that their story will always be bigger than either of them alone. Their legacy has become one of country music's most enduring narratives. It's the story of two towering figures whose partnership created something timeless, fractured under pressure, then found grace in the final years. Dolly's late-life honesty has not tarnished Porter's image. It has humanized it. It has shown that behind the glimmer of the Opry lights, behind the television smiles, were two real people navigating fame, ambition, and emotion in ways that left lasting marks. Her admissions have closed a circle that remained open for half a century. What began as a partnership built for television has become a deeply human story of loyalty, conflict, silence, and ultimately, forgiveness. Dolly Parton's journey with Porter Wagoner is more than a story of music. It's a story of ambition, power, heartbreak, and the quiet ways people shape each other's lives. What began as a professional opportunity became a bond that tested both of them in ways neither could have predicted. Over the decades, their paths diverged, their conflicts hardened, and time eventually softened what pride once obscured. Today, their legacy stands not as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to the complexity of human connection. Dolly's late-life honesty has peeled back the image the public once saw, revealing something far more raw and meaningful beneath it. Her voice, once entwined with Porter's on stage, has carried the truth forward, ensuring that their story is remembered not just for the songs they sang, but for the lives they lived through them. For more emotional stories, check out this video.